Hello, it's Tim, Gnostic Tarot Cards. I didn't have anything particular I wanted to talk about, but I did want to show you that I got Jean Bouchard's Masonic Tarot. Yeah, I absolutely love this deck. I will be presenting some talks on it at some time, but not right now. I just wanted to show you that. The other thing I wanted to show, my camera's a little bit off, so let me restart real quick. I'll cut this out and then I'll restart. Super more stable. Okay, that's a lot better. It was all lopsided like this. So, yeah, it's Tim with Gnostic Tarot Cards. What I was doing was showing the Jean Bouchard Tarot, Masonic Tarot. I got this on eBay. Absolutely wonderful deal on this deck of cards. It's an out-of-print deck. As you can see, the edges are completely new. They're completely free of any scuffs or anything. It came with a booklet that's in French, English, and German. But this deck is phenomenal. I haven't looked at the foundations of it. It looks like it has an alphabetical reference to it, but there's also, here, let me show you. So you're going to love this. I'll show you a little bitty secret in here. In the Scottish Rite, Albert Pike has some language that he goes through in what's called the Book of Words. I think you can get it. It's part of his Magnus Opus. And I just saw this just now, so I'm going to show you and reveal it. In that book, he gives a alphabetical diagram for certain geometrical symbols that you'll see in Masonic rites. So on this card, I'll show you right here. You see right there, it looks like it's a plain old square, but it's not just a plain old square. On all of these cards is a diagrammatic representation of the Masonic information that's encoded on it. So I'll give that away at one point. Very amazing stuff. And then the other thing I wanted to show is I just made this. Let me get it real quick. This is a small version of Dionysius Freyr's representation of the Yakabama system. In this diagram is so much. There's absolutely so much. I couldn't talk about it possibly within an hour or whatever, but I haven't gone live in a while. Here, look at those images. And I put them all in one little frame so I could sit there and meditate on it. But absolutely phenomenal stuff in these images. So one day I'll share with some of that. So amazing, so amazing. This tarot, it contains, I'd say, a lot of the secret information in tarot. There's just so much here. If you want, I can do some review of it at one point. But in it, there's so much. I mean, it goes without saying that this deck was highly attuned to the esoteric tradition, and partly because the author, Jean Bouchard, was an actual, not only occultist, but he was a French Mason, and he was one of the highest degree Masons there was. So this deck was published in the early 80s, I think is the date of publication. Early 80s and 1980s. And it contains information in it that is just so profound. For instance, Let me go to a card and show you just something so amazing on it. Well, probably not. But anyway, this is a really good deck. And I will possibly talk a lot about it in the future. I'm not sure how much I'll say. You might have to get your own, which you probably can't because it's out of print, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So as you see, I got all my books behind me. They're not all of them, but I got a lot of them. Recently, I just got Euclid's 3 volumes of Elements, so it's fun to go through that. That's absolutely entertaining for me. So I always show toys when I'm on my little broadcast. As you can see, I got books all over the place behind me, and then I got some stuff up here. So usually I'll present like a symbol or something, esoteric that most people have not heard of. This isn't just like something you can go into your local bookstore and be like, hey, tell me about the inner workings of this particular tarot, and they're going to be like, what are you talking about? This is crazy talk. No one talks like this. This isn't something that, we usually do. So that was what was on my mind. And as part of that, I wanted to show you, what was I going to show? Oh yeah, I was going to show you this. I'll be right back. I always try to show you all toys that I buy. Oh, I dropped them all on the ground. So hopefully I'll find them all. On Amazon, I was able to find a set of gemstones. You can probably see them right here. But these aren't just gemstones. These are actually platonic solids. So each one of these platonic solids, there's 7 of them, represents a body of information that usually people aren't able to grasp, but that's why I talked about Euclid's Elements, because these platonic solids were actually known and highly talked about by the Pythagoreans. So these are not actually platonic solids, they're Pythagorean solids. The icosahedron, there's so many of them. There's an 8-sided, there's the, this one is really cool, the dodecahedron. So, I mean, you got all of the solids right here. I got them in gem form, and then one is a sphere, so it's pretty cool. But these are absolutely phenomenal little gems that I got. So when I read Euclid's Elements, and you can see there's a 6-pointed star here. See that? And then each one of these little areas is where you would put the stone. So it's a kind of cool little thing that I got on Amazon for 20 bucks. So I get esoteric stuff like this all the time. You can see up here is a green egg. And I don't know, there's stuff all over the place. So here we got tarot, masonry, we got hermetic stuff, Steiner, a lot of Western esotericism. Over here we got Swedenborg, a little bit of Jung. We got mystical Kabbalistic stuff. So, and then I got Sardarian Rosicrucian tradition right there. So yeah, there's a lot. There is absolutely a lot. So anyway, that is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the Platonic and Pythagorean solids. And what I found was that the Platonic solids are talked about in Plato's Timaeus, which was really awesome to me. So I have Plato's Timaeus, I don't know really how to say it perfectly. you scholars out there can correct me, but I have Plato's Timaeus over here in this stack of books somewhere. So what I was going to do is eventually talk about the Platonic solids, some of the geometrical principles behind them, work with the Bouchard's Masonic Tarot, and share with you some of the deeper principles of the Scottish Rite Masonry. But also, I got so much stuff related to the geometry. There's a number system that hides behind a lot of this information that you'll see. There's no point to all of this. It's like a really long lecture about stuff that is not normally known nor cared about, really. Weirdos like me like it. But this is actually a number system. You see, all of this representation is a numerical design based on the number interactions of mythological and theological aspects. So it's super amazing that you go through in some of the esoteric, mostly all of the esoteric societies, but in particular, I'll show you a diagram you probably won't see. In particular, it can share a little bit of that with you, which in the early 1700s, Martinez de Pasquale in, I think it was Spain or maybe South France, had a group of esoteric practitioners that were called the Alucoan, which the common Christian mysticism of Martinism is known from. So that is where a lot of that energy is coming from. These are representations of Boma. That was Alucoan Martinism. And we have Scottish Rite Masonic Tarot right here. All of this is super interrelated and linked. I'm just not giving you reasons why it is. You're going to have to either know it or you don't. And that's a reason why you can come back and talk with me. The Platonic solids are a lot about that, as well as the geometry of Euclid. So, yeah, I just go on and on and on about this. I would do a what I would do is like a scripted version of this, but I don't like doing that. The information doesn't come as good as it does when we do it this way. Otherwise, I have a topic that I want to go on about, and I'll rail and rail and rail about a topic which may not be energetically relevant or present to what those branches of conversation are on that. So I don't know if anybody really likes to do that sort of thing, but that's one of my favorites. So part of Gnostic Tarot cards is to show you the Western esotericism that lies behind these esoteric societies and mystical teachings that have happened since, I don't know about like Gnostic times, but I do know that there is a long period of time that the inner tradition of number, theological, and very deep mystical experience has been conveyed. So that is kind of what Gnostic Tarot cards does, but I won't publish any of this information except through on YouTube or videos. And now we're doing it on LiveMe because this is mainly an oral tradition. So the tradition we're talking about, you're not really going to read in books. It's private research, investigations. You don't just have like an esoteric blabber out there that's like, blah, 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 here's the core functioning behind this system of thought. Mainly because that hasn't really been available to people until the late modern era. And when I say late, I mean it was tried with the Golden Dawn, but they didn't have the unrestricted access that we now do in our modern society. It was something that was absolutely not available to any occultist before the Golden Dawn, except through, and here's the point, except through groups of people that would meet up and talk specifically about this in like lodges. They would philosophically speculate on the ideas that were not only controversy, but were unknown to the public at large about these things, such as Masonry and Tarot is a big one. Another one is number philosophy, like I was saying. The other is a theological understanding of the deep principles of not only Christianity, but the deep principles behind all of our psychology when it comes to religion and spirituality. This is what I believe one of those representations in a strong, strong way, more than like even a mandala expresses, because it has stages. So as you go through the stages, you're able to incorporate different ideas all the way through. And I don't have the 13th one, which I thought I'd just put in a nice little frame, a big frame. But that's one of the things I'm working on right now, is presenting that information. Let's see here. So yeah, this new Tarot I got on eBay, out of print, the Bouchard Tarot. So let's see another cool one. And it's Kabbalistic too, so I'm purposefully not going through every piece of symbolism on it. It's a gigantic layer cake. Not to mention every one of the cards has a deeply esoteric meaning behind it. You have the square and compasses on it. Well, you probably can't see that here. Let me move a little closer. Hi again. So on the Masonic Tarot, you have, let's just flip to a random card. This is, I think this is the Ace of Pentacles, the Ace of Coins. So you see that nice, beautiful golden finish that it has, but it has a cube up here. And that cube is amazing. All of it is amazing, but you see there's deep representations on here. Let's see. This is the first time I've looked at this particular card. You have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-sided star right there where the 6-sided star is. That's super important. Most people wouldn't know why there's an 8-sided star there, but when you start looking at the Platonic solids, you get a representation that the 8 is the Ogdoad, that real value, because that's what the coins usually represent as money, but real value lies in, this is the first time I've looked at this, lies in, you see up here, that's called the perfect ashlar. Real value lies in perfecting and enlarging our spiritual experience deep within ourself, that Jung would talk about. But these stars are based on the Brotherhood of the Ogdoad. So underneath it, I think that's an apple. It looks a lot like an apple to me. It could be a star that comes out of death, out of the experience of dying. One is awakened to the true value in life. I'm trying to flash you my ring. And the true value in life. And you're able to start seeing what a non-encultured way of looking at the world is. So that's just one card. And I'm pretty confident that's what that means. I haven't even looked at well, let's do it. Let's look at the meaning in the book. Here you go. Let's see how close I was to it. I could be absolutely freaking wrong, so there's no doubt in my mind that I could be absolutely wrong about these things. I don't know if the minors are in this. And this is the book that's in French, English, and German. So I'm going to the area where it talks about the cards. 65, I think it is, page 65. So it says the one or ace represents the unity considered as a basis, a theoretical force. This stuff is so cool to me. So it just gives a general information about the coins in tarot function with their values, refer to picture and numbers in the following pages, indicate the necessities, the possibilities or the risks attached to material or human values. So exactly what I was talking about. This is showing that out of a death of the old, a value of the new now comes up. Where we once saw money as the root of all experience, money as the experience of a zero sum loss or gain representation, now we're seeing that there's more to life. There's an experience psychologically, there's an experience initiatically, there's a theological experience. We're not here just to be these little bitty robots that run around and go, buy my wares, buy my wares. That's not what we're here for. So that was super fun. That was one card, by the way. We can literally rail for like hours on these things. But I won't, which I could. I could just keep going. That would drive everybody probably pretty batty. But, so yeah, that's the kind of tarot that I'm pretty much interested in. It's not a tarot that is like, oh, wise and powerful cards, tell me your future and where you're going to go in your relationship. That's not the level of tarot that I usually do. I'm not that kind of practitioner. I use the tarot as a tool to kind of have insight into the unknowable. Is what the Pythagoreans called the incommensurables. This is the irrational part of the numbers that people can't see in whole numbers. Whole numbers contain units that are easily chopped up and put into form. But the incommensurables, the unknown aspects of not only Godhead, but the unknowable aspects are what tarot helps us do. It gives us a one-to-one correlation with that information, and it starts to filter down into our experience what things could be known through something that is like a bridge. So they're messengers, and that's how I see the tarot. But it's pretty cool stuff for me anyway. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is introduce the Masonic Tarot of Bouchard, talk about this wonderful diagram system here, which one day I may do a video on, I may not. This was shown to me by my teacher, Christine Payne Towler. She went through this with me extensively the other night, but I got to tell you, there's a lot in here. One, let's see if we're ready for this. No, it's not really something that I can explain right off the bat. If you see it, be sure to send me a message, ask me some questions or something about it. I'll be open to talking about it with you. But the main thing about this is it shows a pantheistic way of working with the energies that are in Godhead. It's not just this do good, be good, get good kind of thing. It shows that when you have an experience that pops open your life, that there's a reasoning behind that this isn't just random chaos that's come and obliterated your circumstances and forced you to revalue and shape your hierarchy again. But what this is a way of presenting to us some of the deep the deep narrative that the self will go through in a period of time, through one existence, and how that ties into several existences that can't be seen, I would say. Because it's important to realize that this God that we're talking about is non-local and non-linear. It's not something that is just going to come through and be like, now you've been given the gift of a linearity progress and, localized experience. It's like, this is a very deep transcendental thing that we're looking at. And one of the things that Christine has shown me is she did an article recently on synchronicity that's going to be published in the C.G. Jung Institute's newsletter called Rhizome, or the academic society that they have, and the C.G. Jung Institute has a paper that they publish, a journal. So her paper is going to be part of that journal forthcoming, but it's on synchronicity, and it starts to talk about a non-local experience of reality. So what exactly that started popping off for me was these Platonic solids. The form of the Platonic solids is something that they did not want to let happen in Egypt. Was the only place that they did, but everywhere else in Western culture was like, no, we're not going to let this come through. It was all stuck in an idealism that wouldn't come to a manifested form. And what this does is it keeps a person locked away in their mind. The incommensurable, or the experience of the unknown in the heart, isn't really conveyed to a person because they're so locked into the tetractys being only 1, 2, and 3. You're not able to get to the fourth level, which is the geometrical reality. And this is what the article on synchronicity starts to present in a way better fashion than I just explained. But it starts to show that we are not just these human beings living out an existence based on our physical life. And we're also not just these human beings that are living out this mental representation and emotional reactivity to that mental representation, that we're both. We are, we're the top and the low at the same time. We're the left and the right. We're and, not ors. And that's super, super important, because negation only exists with a comparison. You can't negate something that is already whole. You have to posit that there's a negation of one side and then there's an affirmation of another. And there's a reason why I'm bringing that up. Mephistopheles in Faust is said to be the spirit of negation. That when you negate something, you're saying this is not. Which you are also affirming something that is. So in linearity, you say all of this is, and anything outside of that linear line is not. And that is a big, big way that our minds get stuck in idealism, because Buddhist philosophy says that there's an arising, there's an existence in there, and then there's a dissolution of that duration. Basically, it says there's arising, there's duration, and there's cessation. In the duration, I'm not just trying to focus on my face, in the duration period of time is what we call the linear experience of reality, but that is only linear. It doesn't take into factor these other experiences of non-locality or non-linearity. So, this is an incommensurable that most people will need to entertain, that there is a non-linearity, a non-locality of existence that has nothing to do with the present incarnation, which is part of the duration. And Buddhist philosophy does this very well. They talk about reincarnation, which was actually ousted. It was not allowed to be talked about in Christian theology. That was one of the main reasons for the Nicene Creed, which is there is no life outside of the primal experience that you're having right now. That was absolutely not true. Through all other societies, there was never a time when they denied reincarnation, such as Christianity denied reincarnation. So I don't even know why we went there. Oh yeah, because there's multiple births, and the multiple births are from an experience that's depicted, as my own personal insight, in this diagrammatic way for Christians. It talks about how when this dual experience of throwing one side, and this is in Jungian philosophy too, when this dual experience of throwing all of the good over here and all of the bad over here was happening, there was no way to integrate them. So you had one holistic pattern over here, and you have one holistic pattern over here, and the twain never shall meet. Well, there's a mediator between those two experiences of the ultimately bad and the ultimately good. There's a mediating influence through that. That's very, very important. There's something that has karmically bound us to the bad or karmically bound us to the good, and never the twain shall meet. So that's part of what the building is about, is building a whole structure, building a temple that can hold the dungeon and the palace, so to speak. And that's what a lot of Jungian work is about. It's called the not the coincidentia positorum. It's called the mysterium conjunctionis. It's about unifying these inseparable pairs that seem like they're ontologically and epistemologically set in one area in opposition to the other. And this is a major, major important place to get to. That though there is in our conventional experience, this is Buddhism, by the way, though there is a separation in our conventional experience, in an ultimate reality, there is no real separation. But that is a hard thing to do when you don't entertain that idea for a state of holism. You entertain that idea for a state of dualism. So you say, the two shall never meet. That's not true. And then it's the two shall never separate. That's not true. So they both meet and separate. And that's the solving coagula of alchemy. And basically, Eliphas Levi was one of the main proponents of solving coagula. But see, I wouldn't have known I was going to talk about that had I written all that down. I was like, all right, who's gonna fathom a conversation about Bouchard's tarot and value coming from just a random selection of the card being a perfect ashlar, and our breaking outside through death, the experience of a transcendental living. And that's exactly what Moni Sadhu says about the death card, by the way, that the death is not a linear cessation of one place and another. It's the birth of something. Death isn't just ceasing, it's the birth of another thing. Only in linear thought is there a beginning, a duration, and a cessation. In nonlinear thinking, there's no such thing as beginnings. Every moment is a new beginning. Every moment is a new duration, and every moment is a cessation. So it becomes this experience of no longer forcing mind into categories of locality and linearity. But that's Nagarjuna. It's not fun to study all the time. Nagarjuna is really something that the physicists now, Christine told me this, the physicists now are starting to look at. They're like, how can something be both and how can something be both or, and also how can it maintain its own integrity as a separate thing? That's pretty much in a nutshell what Nagarjuna says. It says there's a postulate, there is a conclusion, there is a similarity between them, and there's also a difference between them. And so all things exist and non-exist and are separate and together at the same time. Nagarjuna was an awesome thinker, which didn't know we'd be talking about this, huh? Which is, I have a book on Nagarjuna's fundamental verses of the middle way. And I want to get it out, but I don't exactly know where it is. Might be over here. I have when I moved out of my old house, I put a lot of my books in separate areas. So a bunch of them are in this container right here. It's like the Buddhist Gnostic container, because I just don't have enough bookshelves to put all of them. But I really want to read you the first verses of Nagarjuna's fundamental verses of the middle way. I just cannot locate where the book is at this moment. So, locality, nonlinearity, reincarnation, Masonic tarot, number philosophy, Boma. I mean, this stuff goes on and on and on. And it all links up together. The reason why number is so important to me is because the old philosopher and Kabbalist Abraham Abulafia, started to say, he did say, but the reason why I say started to say is because it wasn't really let through. Abulafia was cut off at the knees, so to speak. They didn't let him walk his whole way through. He went to Italy, and then after Italy taught Pico di Mirandola, I think it was, about some of the verses on his theological 900 verses, which were absolutely contested by the Catholic Church in the early 1600s, 1400s. But my point is that Abulafia had a way of working with number that was different than anybody in history. And that is talked about in this book by Yehuda Albertini, and it's called I can't remember all these facts. The Ladder of Ascent. It's super important to talk about a ladder because this depicts what Christine calls the ladder of lights. Boma's key to, it's called the clavis, and I'm going to buy it in a week, but it's the key to Bohm's philosophy is about a ladder of experience. So that ladder of ascent is a numerical ladder of ascending through the number permutations of Torah and the Jewish scripture. So it's really fascinating stuff. I don't have a lot of it down in the sense that I can present you this fast, that information. I mean, a lot of it is grounded in the Sefer Yetzirah, mathematical computations of the Sefer Yetzirah. I haven't looked at it in relation to Greek geometry yet. I've only looked at it in a separation from geometrical forms, but all comes down to number. The geometrical forms that are in the Platonic solids are possibly part of the Sefer Yetzirah. I haven't investigated that, and someone may be able to tell me something different about it. But the Sefer Yetzirah shows that number is really at the core of all existence. Even when there's a solid number, that solid number is arrived at by other non-solid numbers and solid numbers combining together. And all numbers can be broken into their constituent parts, which is really the philosophy of emptiness. But when you're putting it to number, that is a very challenging thing to do because people don't like to break a number up. Usually numbers are these whole, strong, unified formations that don't break into parts. That's exactly what Pythagorean does. Part of the Valentinian Gnosticism is showing through aeonology, the aeons and the pleroma, that fullness can break into an experience of separateness. That was what not Valentin Tomberg, but Einar Thomasin of the Valentinian Gnosis was doing. He was showing that this aeonology that happens in Valentinian Gnosticism actually is a representation through theology what the Pythagoreans were doing through number and geometry. They were showing that there can be an interruption in the whole, and that shattering of the whole, fragmentation of the adhesive. Basically, I just said that word, like an adhesive based state. When it breaks apart, there is a continuity in the fragmentation as well. That is what a lot of people have a problem with. When you bust up the solidarity of something, how does the fragmentation have the ability to defragment and come back together as a whole? That is a big problem, not only in psychology, but esotericism too. How do you bust something up, introduce the anomaly, as the Matrix calls it? How do you introduce the anomaly and keep together the harmony and system that was existing before that anomaly came and shot through? That is the irrational. That is why pi has a problem when you try to compare it to this mathematical equation of 3.2 blah blah blah. It's the pi is one of the harmonizers in the universe, but when compared to the irrational, it shatters. The entire system of pi has a hard time of staying together when you take in the irrational. That is what the incommensurable was saying through geometry. That's why number is so powerful of a form to meditate upon. Because when we start to look at number, and the Tarot is all about number, when we start to look at number, we see that number is not just this, okay, I put one bean here, and then I put another bean. How many beans do I have? Number, and what Boma, it's a long way to get here, but this is what Christine told me to talk about eventually. Number as a multiplicity is just a different way of fragmenting the whole. And there's not a way to fragment the whole without losing the whole when you focus on the fragmentary part. So what she likes to tell me is that one is not losing its identity when it goes to two. It is becoming more and more discernible through all of its 10,000 parts. It doesn't lose its unity. It doesn't become fragmented. That is where our or-based mentality, freaking out all the time, trying to cut things up and put them into dualism, causes us a kind of fragmentary mind. This is very important. This is what Yeshua was talking about when he was preaching to people, saying that you need to become whole. You need to make your mind se'ef, which is no longer divided. This is what sanity is a wholeness of mind. The wholeness of mind is not entertaining a fragmentary part that busts up your experience when the what should I say? It doesn't bust up your experience of having wholeness when the rupture happens. There's a rupture in every psychological experience of arising, duration, and cessation. When the rupture happens, when the erupting happens, when the breaking of the shell happens, what happens to the whole? The whole does not lose its holistic nature. It just becomes difficult to see it through all the shattering of the parts. That is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to number, because numbers don't like to play well with others. They like to have an identity that says, no, 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 I am one and this is two. And there's nothing that links us together. There's no part. We are whole unto ourselves. But when you're looking at higher mathematics, the one and the two have to interrelate. There's no way to go from 1 to 2 without interrelating them together. So this is a part of the Western delusion, is to fragment the 1 and then to put it as the 2. In fact, it's super important. I can't go through every single possible gyration of thinking that goes with these things. I'm just trying to give out little hints. And I probably shouldn't say, but in the old Catholic blessing, the one, Catholic meaning universal, they held up one finger. They said one was the blessing, you know? They blessed with one. They didn't do it with the now known blessing, which you'll see on the tarot card. That would bring us back to tarot. On the Hierophant, which hardly anybody knows about, is the 2-finger blessing. Look that up on Google. I'm not going to completely reveal to it, but this is a really good point. Are you being blessed from a fragmentary mind, or are you being restored to a holistic mind from a fragmentary mind? Are you fragmenting your mind by trying to bust out this holistic category into these things that can hold it, and therefore choosing one over the other? Maybe. But what a true blessing is to restore back the holism of your thinking, of your being, of your experience, and not letting locality and linearity come in and fragment that. It's super important. But I didn't know I would be giving that discussion. And in psychology, this is so important because when you connect with somebody, you can't do it through a fragmentary state. You can't go, I'm less than a person, and when I connect to you, I become a whole person. That's a busted way of relating with people. But because of this tendency to fragment our minds, we are able and have pretty much perpetuated an idea of a fragmentary relationship. That's not really a relationship. That's an illusion that a person projects out and then they try to unify with. And eventually the rupture happens where it's like, oh, fragmentation isn't true. But it is true at the same time because it's an experience known. So this is something Christine tells me all the time, that it's an and universe. It's not an or universe. This is the cross. This is the coincidentia oppositorum. This is the horizontal and vertical, both unified in the same experience. You can't bust the horizontal and the vertical into a different place because the twain shall never meet. So when the horizontal level and the vertical level meet, there's a crossing. When that cross happens and the 4 happens, then we have a real experience of holism. And this is what Jung said in the Aeon book, which he didn't write until he was like in his 60s, I'm pretty sure. He gives a pretty gigantic dissertation on the moving from a 3-based mindset to a 4-based, the quaternary. When you're able to take into mind a 4-based, a form-based, 4-based quaternary, you're able to experience a unification of the opposites. The coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of opposites, no longer is a fragmentary state. You're able to say, yeah, you are you and I am me, without each of us losing a portion of our identity. Numbers don't like to do that unless you entertain their irrational aspects. This is why this study is so important. The incommensurability between the numbers has to exist for the numbers to have wholeness and continuity in their being. So I know it seems like it's complicated. It's not too complicated. Just read a whole bunch of books and get yourself some stones and it'll be absolutely okay. So I've been studying this by the time we haven't been on Live Me and wanted to present it in a way, I guess, now the Bouchard Tarot is showing that our value system in wholeness or our value system in fragmentariness causes a chain reaction through our experience of relationships and consciousness and symbolism. So with that, I feel like I need to breathe and stop talking.